Some connectors that are used very commonly in electronic circuits are not available in multisim. So when you're going to make a PCB, you have a little problem that you cannot use some commonly available connectors. So in this video, I'm going to show you how you can adjust the connectors that are available in multisim. Uh, so the first connector which we're going to see in multisim is the DC barrel jack. It is also called a DC power jack. It looks something like this. It is very commonly used, and it is also used in the standard Arduino Uno. So this is used to provide power to some circuits with this kind of connector. And unfortunately, it is not available in multisim. And the closest thing which is available is PJ007. So what we want to use is PJ002, but what is available in multisim is PJ007. So we're going to use this in multisim, but when we are making the layout, we will change it to the layout of this connector. These have similar layouts, but they are a little different in the dimensions. So this have very thin pins, something like squares for the pads, and this connector, the PJ002A, has rather larger pins, something like this, and it has more rectangular pads. So we will start with PJ007 in multisim. It is available in base connector, and then power, and then PJ007. So it looks something like this in multisim. And to make its layout, we have to transfer it to Ultiboard. So we just transfer it to Ultiboard like this, and we have this connector right here. So there are some important features of this connector which we want to see in its layout given in the datasheet. So this has 3 connectors in total. 2 are parallel and they are placed something like this. And one of them is, and the third connector is actually perpendicular to these 2 first connectors. And there is a distance between these 2 connectors, and the distance between the center of these 2 connectors and this connector, which is 4.7 millimeters. And we also want to adjust the size of these pads, which are all similar together, but they are obviously different from the size of these pads. So we have to change all of these parameters. The first thing which we are going to do is to set the distance between these 2 pads, which is 13.7 minus 7.7. So this is 6 mils. So we have to convert this to, this is 6 millimeters. These dimensions are millimeters. So we have to convert these to mils, which are the unit which we are using in Ultiboard. So we convert 6 millimeters to mil, which comes to be 236 mils. As we are using a grid of 50 mils, we have to come to the closest point, the closest grid unit, which is 250 mils, which is 14 mils larger than this. So we are going to use 250 mils as the distance between these 2 pins. And 250 mils comes to be a distance of 5 grid units, because each grid unit is 50 mils. So we want to have a distance of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we want this connector to be at this place. So we have to select this component like this, and then we press this button, which is in place part edit, and then we have to shift this pad 1 unit upwards, because we want to have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 units between these 2 pads. So when we try to select this pad and move it upwards, there is a little error message which is cannot move pads. This message comes because these 2 pads are fixed together. They are joined in a group like this. So you can select this group, and you have you know that this is a single group, you can move them together, but you cannot move one of them. So what you have to do is to select this group and then press right click and press this button, which is ungroup selection. So when you ungroup them, you can move them individually around. So we need this pad to be here, and now this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 grid units, and the distance between the center of these two pads and this pad is 4.7 mils, and 4.7 mils comes to be um, about 185. Uh, sorry, this is 4.7 millimeters, and this comes to be 185 mils. So we're going to use 200 mils, and 200 mils means that this pad has to be 4 grid units away from these two, from the center of these two, and this is going to be here. And we want to have this at the center of these two pads, so this should be better here. So now we have to adjust the size of these pads, and this, we know that the size of this pin is 2.5 millimeters, which is 100 mils, and similarly we have made some errors in the placement of these pads, and we need some margin here too. So what we're going to do is to make these pads a little larger, and from some calculations we know that we want to have them a little wider and a little uh, long in this dimension as well. So we just double click this pad and then new window will open. This is through hole pin properties, and when we open the pad window, we see that this is a complex pad. This is actually a rectangular pad with an oval hole. So we want to have a rounded rectangle like this, and the length of this rectangle should be set to 100, and the corner radius is the radius of these corners. I think 50 would look nice, and the pad diameter, which is the length between these, sorry, the length in the horizontal dimension, this should be something like 200 mils. So the pad will look is not a straightforward hole. This is not a circular hole. This is a rectangular hole. So this should be advanced hole, and then the properties. If you change this to 100, this unit to 150, and this the radius to 25, it will make a nice hole. Sorry, I think this is 50. So this will make a nice hole for this pin, which is VJ002 pin. So you need to have this plated. So you this should be checked, and when you press OK, and you will see that this hole is a nice. So this pad is good enough to fit one of these pins. So this pin is 40. Sorry, 100. This should be 50. Yeah, this looks nice now. And this should be 200. And in the properties, you need to have 50, 150, and 25. And this should be plated. So you press OK, and you see that this pad is now changed. You apply similar steps to this pad. This must be 100. This must be 50. And you need a pad diameter, which is 200. And in the holes, you need to have a rounded rectangle, and this should be 100. So this should be 50. This should be 150, and this should be 25. So now this pad is set as well, and now you need to adjust this pad. This is going to be a rounded rectangle with a length of 100 and a corner radius of 50, and a pad diameter of 200. Yeah, it should be in the vertical direction. And in the whole property, you need this to be 50, this to be 150, and this thing to be 25. Yeah, this is complete. So you also need to adjust the silk screen symbol of this connector. So I have to make something like this. And remember that okay, so you have to make the box in such a way that this line, the leftmost line, intersects with the center of this pad of the bottom pad. So this is finally ready, and you just press this button again, in place part edit, to close the part editor, and now this is ready to use in layout. And the second connector which we are going to adjust today is the button actually. So the push button looks something like this, and this is a very common push button you use in all kind of circuits, and this is also used in on Arduino. It is a slightly different version, but it has a very similar shape. So when we check the layout of this button, it looks something like this. You need to have 4 pads, and the distance between two rows is a little shorter, and it is a little elongated in this way because the pins are on 2 sides like this, and this distance is going to be shorter than this distance. So the closest thing which we have in multisim is a switch which is uh, available in place basic, then switch, and then dip switch pack with 2 pins. So we're going to use this pin, sorry, this switch, and we're going to now, because we already have this connected in Ultiboard. Yeah, let's just ignore it. So you transfer it to Ultiboard, and well, that connector is ruined again, but we have this switch now, which we're going to adjust in the next few minutes. So when you see this dimensions, you see that there are 2 rows of pins which are closer together, and the distance between them is 4.5 millimeters. And you see that the distance between the opposite rows, sorry, the opposite columns is 6.5 millimeters. So first we connect 4.5 millimeters to mil, and we see that this is 177 millimeters, sorry, 177 mils. And the closest thing which we have in the 50 grid board is 200 mils. So we need to set the distance between these 2 pins as 200. We see that this is 100 because this is 2 grid units. And when we see the distance between these columns of pins, it is 6.5 millimeters, and 6.5 millimeters is 255 mils in mils. And when we round it upwards, we are going to use 300 mils in this direction. So we need to have 200 mils in this direction between these 2 pads, and 300 mils in this direction. We see that the distance between these 2 pads is 100 mil because it is 2 grid units away, and the distance between these pads vertically is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is already 300 mils. We don't need to change the distance in this direction. We only need to adjust the distance between these 2 pads and these 2 pads also. So we just select the button, we press in place part edit, and you just select this pad and you shift it 2 units here, and similarly this pad, and you just there's this line here, and set the length of this line and the length of the, yeah, this is done. So you just press this button, in place part edit, and this is ready. Yeah, you can use this to mount these kind of push buttons. So this is how we use push buttons in multisim. And the next thing which we are going to see is the 2-pin screw terminals. These are also called terminal blocks, and these are very commonly used in circuits where you have to supply power to a circuit. So these can carry a decent amount of current, like at least 5 amperes, and sometimes 10 amperes if it is of good quality. So the closest thing which we have in multisim with this connector is the connector in terminal blocks, and that is 282834-2. This is a 2-pin connector. It is not exactly of the same size, but it is close. So we transfer this to Ultiboard as well. And here we see this is our connector which we are going to adjust right now. So we know that the distance between these two pins is about 200 mils, and these pins are quite large, quite thick pins, because they are going to carry a lot of current. So we have to change the size of this, the shape of this connector, and we're going to select this and then press in place part edit. And if we try to move one of these pads, we will also see an error here because these two pads are grouped together. You cannot move them individually. So first you have to select them as a group, and then you press ungroup, and then you will be able to move these pads. So this is very simple. You just the silk screen layer of this connector is already a rectangle, so you don't have to drag individual lines. You just set the size of this box here, and similarly like this. So this is done. So you can just press in place part edit, and then you have to set the size of these pads. These pads are not actually very good to solder with hands, so you need to have a little better pads. So you just press one of these pads and press sorry, this must be a round pad, and you can set any value which looks good to you. And I think we can just set it to the pad diameter to 100 mils and the drill diameter to 50 mils. And similarly, so this looks pretty nice, and this is just the connector which we have available in the market. So these are the 3 connectors which we saw how to edit in multisim. The first one is the barrel connector, which looks something like this. The second one is a push button, and the third one is this terminal block. So these are not basically available in multisim directly. So you have to use connectors and components which have similar shapes, but you can adjust their dimensions in Ultiboard, and later you can use them in your layout. So this is the end of the video. I'm just going to stop.